Okay, we mentioned yesterday that the big deal on this Stamp Act, and the best action that the Stamp Act Congress did, is when they convinced, or we even got to that yet. Yeah. When the Stamp Act Congress convinced the colonial merchants to do what, Paris? Tigner, what are you doing? This is an AP course. I mean, coming without a pencil would be like going to football without your pads. Would you ever do that?
Just pick one and give it back to me.
I mean, I just can't imagine you would. Can you imagine that?
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. Anyway, Paris, tell us what was the big controversy over the Stamp Act that actually the delegates that went to the Stamp Act Congress did. What resulted from what they did?
They had the merchants sign non-importation agreements which cut off trade with Britain.
Very good. That was very smart on their part. They got together and they basically, it was kind of an interesting thing, is that when the Stamp Act Congress got together, those 9 delegates from 9 different colonies in New York City in October of 1765, they first asserted their loyalty to the King of England, and they promised all due subordination to Parliament, which is a little odd when they were upset, but they understood that they were legal citizens of England. But they did vow to resist all taxes that were levied without the consent of their own legislatures. And as a result of those actions, they got the colonial merchants to sign those non-importation agreements, which said that they would not purchase or import anything from Great Britain. And so we talked about a lot of other things. We talked about the Sons of Liberty and the more radical approach they took. But anyway, we ended yesterday with talking about the repeal of the Stamp Act, and we talked about the British Parliament receiving news of colonial resistance in America, that King George III exclaimed it is undoubtedly the most serious matter that has ever came before Parliament. British merchants were in shock. They were losing money. British-American trade had come to a standstill, and many British merchants faced financial ruin. And as a result, they stood up to Parliament and said, hey, you got to repeal this act. We're going broke here. That's not good for the country that's already in tremendous debt. So they had to make a decision. Are they going to try to continue to initiate this Stamp Act, or are they going to give up, back down, and get rid of it? Well, I'm just going to tell you that the American colonists were not the only people that thought that this taxation without representation was wrong. There were some British leaders who actually sided with the colonists on this and said, hey, taxation without representation is not right, it should be illegal. And one British leader in particular that agreed with the American colonists was Edmund Burke. Edmund Burke was on your ID sheet. So not all British leaders agreed with Parliament that they should tax without representation. And some stood up. Most notably, a British leader by the name of Edmund Burke. And he expressed his support of the colonists. He said that taxing without representation is an illegal measure. So you got the businessmen or the British merchants in Great Britain crying like crazy about the halt in American and British trade, and they're just begging Parliament, or some demanding Parliament, to repeal this act. And now you even have British leaders in your own country that are saying, you know, this really isn't right. You really shouldn't tax without representation. It's illegal. So finally, under the pressures they were receiving, Parliament repealed the Stamp Act in March of 1766. So Parliament repealed the Stamp Act in March of 1766. So finally, under heavy pressure, Parliament repealed the Stamp Act in March of 1766. Well, who do you think celebrated the most? They actually put up a big flagpole called the Liberty Pole and gathered around it in New York City to celebrate the repeal of the Stamp Act. Who did that? They celebrated it?
In New York.
No. I think that's sarcasm. Sons of Liberty. The Sons of Liberty built a huge flagpole after the news came out that the repeal of the Stamp Act, and gathered around it and celebrated their great victory over the British government. Well, the British, to show their muscle, even though they had to fold, passed another law called the Declaratory Act of 1766. So after they had to eat crow, so to speak, and repeal the Stamp Act, they passed another law called the Declaratory Act of 1766. Now, I want you to write down exactly what this act stated and tell me what you think it meant. Here's what the law stated. Quote, Parliament had the full power, write this down, Parliament had the full power and authority. Parliament had the full power and authority to make laws. Parliament had the full power and authority to make laws to bind the colonies and the people of America. Parliament asserted it had the full power and authority to make laws to bind the colonies and people of America in all cases whatsoever. In all cases whatsoever. So the Declaratory Act of 1766 stated that Parliament had the full power and authority to make laws to bind the colonies and people of America in all cases whatsoever. What might be a word we would use to describe that law? Yeah, but what word might come to mind? What do you think? If I said, well, and I guess the school administration asserts they have the full power and authority to make laws to bind the colonies and people of America in all cases whatsoever. Okay, let me rephrase that. I want you to think about this. So let's put it like this. Mr. Smith and Mr. Gunderson have the full power and authority to make laws to bind the students and the teachers of Moreland High School in all cases whatsoever. Well, what word does that remind you? What? A dictatorship. Very, very good. In a way they do that, but if they said that before you came to school, you all had to take, prick your finger and take 3 drops of blood to walk in the front door, you would think they were crazy, wouldn't you? But under this law, could they actually do that according to this law? They really could. So it was so ridiculous of a law that very few colonists even paid any attention to it. But it was a law to do what to the colonists, or try to? Yeah, and aggravate. Keep control, let them know we're the boss, and just more aggravation. Okay? But nobody paid a lot of attention. What they did pay attention to was our next subtopic, the Townshend Acts. The Townshend Acts. The Townshend Acts. It's spelled a little differently than what you might think. The Townshend Acts. They're going to pay attention to this. Now in 1767, Parliament decided again to try to raise some more revenue in America. Because they just repealed the Stamp Act, right? So they got to get something going here because they're still broke, so to speak. So in 1767, Parliament decides to raise revenue in America again. And the man that pushes this is a member of the Parliament by the name of Charles Townshend. Okay, he's the one pushing this idea that we're going to talk about. So in 1767, Parliament decides, hey, we got to find a new way to raise revenue in the colonies to help pay the debt. And the man they put in charge of that was a member of Parliament by the name of Charles Townshend. Thus the name Townshend Acts. Now, what they planned to do initially wasn't that big of a deal. Now, I got you all confused. A direct tax is a tax that whatever governing body issues the tax money goes to that body, whether it be Parliament or a colonial legislature. we kind of talked about indirect tax a little bit. And that was a tax that somebody paid in the purchase of their goods, like you do now. If you go down to the store and buy lunch, you're going to pay 5% tax on it. But you really don't pay that much attention to it. And then somebody might say, well, chicken strips today are 3 for $1, no tax. Well, you can bet they hid the tax in there somewhere for their profit. That's more of an indirect tax. Where the colonists used to pay an indirect tax on things that were coming in for England before all this controversy started? Yes, they were. That's kind of what we talked about before. So basically what Parliament decided to do is they were going to place a duty or a tax on items of everyday use in America that were imported from Great Britain. Okay? The colonists actually were accustomed to paying that type of duty, so Parliament didn't think the tax would cause a whole lot of problem. Well, it really didn't. The tax didn't. It's something else they did that's going to cause problems. So again, Charles Townshend and Parliament decide that they're going to try to find a new way to raise revenue, to try to get this debt taken down, and they pass a law that says they're going to place a duty or tax on all items that Americans purchase or have imported from Great Britain. They didn't think the colonists would be very upset about that because they were used to paying that before, and they really weren't very upset about that. It's what Parliament did next that really set them off. And I want to see if you can think about this. Okay? What would be your concern, Brady, if you were going to tax Americans on products that were imported from Britain? What would be some more things you'd be concerned about? The old S word. Remember Jonesy over there popped it up just crazier? We still have the problem. Anything gets imported, what are you worried about? Smuggling, okay? So, yeah, the S word, not the one you were thinking. But anyway, smuggling. So, again, the British government was concerned about that, so they passed a law known as the Writs of Assistance. They passed a law known as the Writs of Assistance. Writs of Assistance. So Parliament, right after they tell the colonists they're going to tax them on everyday items that come to America from Great Britain, which is no big deal, then they pass a new law known as the Writs of Assistance. Anybody want to know what the present day term for that is? If you think about smuggling. Oh, hey, Mr. Gunderson, you think about that a minute, because I got to talk to Mr. Gunderson about something. Writs of Assistance. Think about what it is. Think about smuggling. Think about those types of things.
Just because I hit him hard. Okay, that's not that S word. No, stop. So that thing that's over there. Yay, it's so pretty. And it always brings my attention. You don't draw it to my attention. You don't have to listen, you don't have to curiosity. Like that red picture over there, the little thing in the corner. Yeah. The best thing about this is that you can get the camera off.
So he's gonna see it at some point.
I know, right? Why is it there? He has Vernon. I don't actually know. They don't even pass on that already. Yeah. I think it's supposed to be someone.
Where what?
Station. I have this.
We're trying to get it all the way to the classroom after medicine.
Has it already happened? You have. Where did it start?
All the way over.
It always starts in Dalton. How did you get it over here?
I got to Pete. Pete got to Morgan. When Morgan was looking for a pencil, I stepped on pencils. You know, we've just been going around.
Oh, swell. We should win Saturday.
Yeah, so we're tired about it.
In a row now.
You
I'm gonna rip it up.
No.
The note you passed in the memo, did you pass it?
Hey,
Do not throw a pen. Back off. Don't back off.
disrespect honey.
All right. What are the writs of assistance? What are they modern day? They're going to try to be a little bit better than they remember what happened with smuggling before. I mean, they inspected the harbors, they inspected the warehouses, they inspected people's houses, they hired snitches. What are writs of assistance so they can do these things with less problems? What is a writ of assistance? If I want to see if Emily's got marijuana in her locker, which she never would, I'm just making a point, I would get a search warrant. Writs of assistance are search warrants. Okay? They're search warrants. Now, let me ask you a question while we're in legality things. If I thought old Paris had contraband in her locker, which again she never would, if I was the principal, would I have the right to go check that locker before, without a search warrant? Would I have that right?
No.
Sure would. You know why? Because that property belongs to the school. Now, would I have the right to go out and get in your car without a search warrant? No, because that car belongs to you. That's the difference. So, if you're in a workplace and they give you a locker, and you have a locker in school, gym locker, whatever, does the administration have the right to search your locker? They actually have the right to search you without a search warrant because you are a student in their school. That's the difference. So, what these writs of assistance were, they were search warrants. And what it did is it basically said, now we got the legal right to search for smuggled goods anywhere in the American colonies, okay? I can search your business, I can search your ship, I can search your home if I want to, looking for smuggled goods or contraband. Contraband is something that would be brought in illegally from another country, right? So, that's what these writs of assistance were. Parliament passed a law stating that they had the right, the legal right, to search your ship, search your warehouse, search your business if you're a colonial merchant, search your homes if we want to, unannounced, walk in. That's what these writs of assistance stated. So a British customs official could enter, like I said, a vessel, a warehouse, a private home. They could ransack the place in the mere hope of finding goods. Well, I think you might have goods in there. Okay? What's the difference between that and a search warrant today? If you go get a search warrant, what two things do you have to put on the search warrant? Well, you got reasonable cause, that's good. You got reasonable cause or you couldn't get the search warrant. But what has to be on the search warrant? You're looking for the exact article in the exact place. I think that Michaela has illegal bubblegum drops in her locker. So I go get a search warrant that gives me the right to look for illegal bubblegum drops in her locker. What happens if I find chocolate milk that's also illegal? Can I bust her for that? No, not with a search warrant says specifically what you're looking for and where. Okay? Okay? Keep that in mind. Although they could maybe push it and get another search warrant before you could get the other stuff out of there and get you. Do you see what I mean? But that's the difference, yeah.
So if I had marijuana in my car, they need a search warrant to search my car, and they find cocaine, they can't send me a drug.
Well, they're going to put drugs on it. They're not going to put marijuana, they're going to put drugs. But if they, let me see if I can make sense of it. If they search your car and find a stolen book from the library, I'm not sure they could do that. You know what I mean? But a specific thing in a specific location. Now, let me ask you this. If the school searched your okay, and I want to get back to what Siobhan said, because she's exactly right. Reasonable cause. Could a police officer come in here and search that locker because he wanted to just see if you had anything bad in it? No. But the school could because it's their locker. So if a school got in your locker looking for marijuana and found stolen guns, they would drill you for both. Okay? And probably the police department, if they saw stolen guns in there, would go get another search warrant to search your locker for stolen guns, would be my guess. Okay? So it's a catch-22. But these particular writs, they could go in, they didn't have any reasonable cause, they could just go in and look anywhere they wanted if they thought maybe you had something without any justification. Well, American colonists just went crazy over this. I mean, they were having no part of it. And I'm going to give you 6 ways that they protested the writs of assistance. 6 ways they protested the writs of assistance. I want you to think about this really carefully. Who would issue these writs? Who would issue these search warrants? Who issues a search warrant when the police want one? County attorney, judge, whatever, yeah, the judge, yeah. Then he has to makes darn sure you have reasonable suspicion. Now, Britain's Parliament's quite a ways from the colonies, so who's going to issue these search warrants or writs? Who are they expecting to issue those? When the British want one, who are they going to go to do it? What courts? Parliamental courts, clear over in Great Britain? What courts? Colonial courts, very good. Well, the first thing that colonists did to protest these writs of assistance is the courts refused to issue the writs. Okay, they refused to issue the writs. So American colonists protested in 6 different ways against these writs of assistance. And the first way was they refused to issue the writs at all. Another way American colonists protested the writs of assistance is they refused to live or abide by the Quartering Act. They said, well, if you're going to do this, we're not going to abide by the Quartering Act, Tristan, which said what?
That soldiers can just walk in your home and stay.
They had to provide housing and food for British soldiers stationed in America. They just simply refused or violated the Quartering Act. Another thing colonists did is they took to advertising. They put all kind of pamphlets all over town.